Okay, so remember the criteria in this project is that you are able to start to communicate with a viewer. So it's not just taking a photo and recreating it exactly the way you see it, but you're trying to choose a color scheme and a texture that relates to the expressive emotion on that person's face. So beyond just replication of an image and more into communicating to the viewer a certain feeling or emotion. So the option for the application that you can use is the Sketchpad app. Remember, there are older versions of it, and so the older version will say like sketch.io. Let's use a newer app because that's going to be the most supported app. And so before we start working on the sphere, I want you to realize different ways that you can fade. So if we go back here, at some point you're going to have to fade from light to dark. And what are the different ways that you can do that digitally? And so I want to show you those here. So whatever color you happen to be working with, one of the first obvious choices that you can do is have less and less marks. So if we have our value scale up here, 5 being black, 0 being white, the more marks that I put right here, the darker it's going to be. And then when I try to transition, I would just have less and less and less marks till I get to my 0, right? That transition between the 5 to the 0, you want to try to make it subtle, so you just kind of keep going over it, filling this in until it's completely dark, and then work your way down until you have basically nothing. And then your opacity for that would be at 100%. And so over here, that's where I have my opacity at 100%. That means it's solid. We're not making it transparent. The second option that you have is to start transitioning between opacity levels. And so over here, I'm going to go from 100%. So really trying to get that value 5 on there with whatever scribbly mark design that you would do, but it'd be kind of like that. And then as I work my way across, I would take it from 100%, and you can go in smaller increments, but I'm going to just go down to 70. And then I would overlap it a little bit. And then come out to here. And then we can go to 40. So it's getting more and more transparent as I go. And then go to 10. And then you can see how you can fade from, so that's kind of a big jump. So maybe we'll call that a 0. And then maybe we need to go to 20 on this one. And then try to get it to transition so it looks pretty like a smooth transition between all of these. So value 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then off till it fades till that 0. The other way that you can go about it is, let's say that we started at, we'll say the 20%. If I just stayed at 20% opacity, so it's very transparent, and then I did another layer, every time I unclick and start another layer, it's going to add a whole another layer of value. So every time I'm adding 20% more of a layer, and so you can start to see it in the value, and this kind of takes a lot of time if you chose this method, but you might do this for specific parts that you're trying to just really change the values very subtly. You might just do a couple layers of that value. Now, if I had my opacity up higher, this would be faster, but every single time, 20% more value is being laid on top of the lines that are already there. Just an option, okay? And so the next one would be to use colors that match those values. So let's say I was going to do that one. At 100%, I'm going to do the first one with just black, grays, and white. So you can see And then I'll do one in color. So 100% opacity for all of them, but now I'm just changing the color itself. So now I'm going to jump down to a lighter color, so a lighter gray. And then change the color to an even lighter gray. And I try to overlap them. See, so that one was sticking out more. This one will stick out more on this side. And so they're just a little bit of weaving it together. So instead of starting here, I'm going to start over here. Oops. Scribbly, scribbly. And then just keep getting lighter and lighter and lighter until you get to that value 0 on your value scale. Okay. If I was to do that same thing with 100% opacity, but just change my colors up, I could go from, I'll start off really light. I'll go the opposite direction. Probably would want to go even lighter than that on my yellow. So something lighter for my 0. And then just keep going through, and it could be any color in any order, but it just has to look like a darker color. So if I have this yellow, this orange looks a little bit darker, kind of overlapping them. Find a different color that's a little darker. Like, does that look a little darker? That kind of jumps a lot. Let's go here. Darker. Now another color that might be darker. This looks pretty dark. As you're going through that value scale. And then at some point, like let's say I get to like purple, I want to make sure it's still getting darker. And then it probably will be something that's a color plus quite a bit of black to get to your value 5. So those are your basic ways of fading inside of a digital program with these messy marks. So more and more gaps, less marks as you go. Changing the opacity right here so that it's more and more transparent as you go. The same opacity, but just multiple layers, more time consuming. Using a different color that matches each value as you go. And so you really need to pick one of these methods for sure, and then you can go back and forth, and you can maybe sometimes you start off like with this 100% opacity, and then you change transparency. So you can mix these up as you go. Just know that these are your options for fading, okay? But one will probably be more of a dominant choice for you, especially if you're doing this one where you're changing the colors as you go.